South Korea will continue to be a frontrunner in endorsing and realizing democratic values. President Yoon underlined the commitment while pledging to host the third Summit for Democracy. Montenegrin authorities say the U.S. filed a request to extradite disgraced crypto fugitive Do Kwon before South Korea, which makes the extradition process even more complicated for Seoul. Russia will no longer share nuke information with the U.S., including notices about missile tests. This comes as Washington notified Moscow earlier this week that it would cease exchanging data on nuclear weapon stockpiles. President Yoon continues to pledge a greater global role for Seoul in promoting democratic values. He's attending the hybrid regional session of the Summit for Democracy in Seoul on Thursday as we speak, after opening the leaders' plenary session virtually last night. This as he announced that South Korea will host the third Summit for Democracy. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has more.
South Korea will champion freedom, human rights and the rule of law as the host of the next and what will be the third Summit for Democracy. That's according to President Yoon speaking at the second virtual summit event, which he co-hosted with the leaders of the United States, Costa Rica, Zambia and the Netherlands. Kicking off the first leaders' plenary session on Wednesday, Yoon stressed the need to defend democracy amid a combination of geopolitical conflicts and competition, which has greatly reduced multilateral cooperation.
특히 지난 세기 인류의 자유와 번영을 이끌어온 민주주의가 중대한 도전에 직면해 있습니다. 규범 기반의 국제 질서를 정면으로 부인하는 권위주의 세력들의 진영화에 더해서 반지성주의로 대표되는 가짜 민주주의가 전 세계적으로 고개를 들고 있습니다.
Yoon also referred to revisionist attempts to change global norms, as well as misinformation that hurts democratic processes like decision-making. To counter such forces and pursue shared prosperity, Yoon said South Korea will advocate freedom in the international arena, having received the support of the global community some 70 years ago from the ashes of the 1950-53 Korean War.
Promoting freedom, democracy and human rights has been at the heart of the Yoon administration's foreign policy. Under the president's vision of turning South Korea into a global pivotal state, the top office says the summit serves as a platform for Seoul to help reinforce a liberal world order.
Furthering such efforts, Seoul will host the third Summit for Democracy, according to a joint statement by Presidents Yoon and Biden on Wednesday. The two leaders said that South Korea's democratic institutions are a beacon of strength in the Indo-Pacific, and that the South Korean people have enduring commitment to government transparency, effective checks and balances, and laws that are responsive to public needs. First launched in 2021 by President Biden, the Summit for Democracy aims to reinforce freedom, civil and political rights by strengthening democratic norms and institutions amid the rise of authoritarianism. Beijing and Moscow's foreign ministries have criticised the latest virtual event, accusing Washington of fueling ideological divisions by framing them as autocratic powers. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
An amphibious landing drill between South Korea and the U.S. is back at the largest scale in 5 years. They're running through assault simulations that involve water, air, and land missions. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-sing was there.
Amphibious ships swarm in from sea. Jets streak across the sky, and Marines charge full speed on land. Some 500 South Korean American Marine forces have taken over Hwajin Beach in the southern city of Pohang for the Ssangyong drill, the largest combined amphibious landing drill in 5 years. And it's the day of decisive action, the centerpiece of this 15-day-long drill.
The Allies are running through a realistic simulation of an amphibious raid, working together like clockwork and presenting themselves as a formidable foe. And that you see behind me is a landing craft air cushion, a device used by the U.S. Navy to transport weapons, and just one of the many craft that's been deployed for this exercise.
The Ssangyong drill has stayed dormant since 2018 to keep alive diplomatic relations with North Korea and to fend off COVID-19. However, this year, the exercise has resumed on a large scale. Around 30 vessels, 70 aircraft, and 50 assault vehicles were mobilized for the drill. Korean and American weaponry provided mutual support, like the Allies' amphibious assault ships, the Korean Dokdo and the American Makin Island.
I cannot think of another or more fitting way to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the alliance between the Republic of Korea and the United States of America than conducting bilateral amphibious operations with our ROK Navy and Marine counterparts.
The Ssangyong drill will continue until April 3rd, with upcoming exercises focused on land drills. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News, Pohang.
Russia says it will end the sharing of information about its nuclear forces with the U.S., including notifications on missile tests under the last remaining nuclear arms treaty with Washington after suspending its participation last month. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
First was Russia pulling back from the New START treaty. Now, Moscow has announced it will end the sharing of information on its nuclear forces with the United States. According to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, Moscow has stopped information exchanges with Washington, including notices on planned test launches of its ballistic missiles. He stressed that any notification and all activity under the New START treaty will be suspended and will not be conducted regardless of what position the U.S. may take. The U.S. had already said Monday that it would halt the sharing of information on its nuclear forces following a decision by Russia to pull back from the New START nuclear pact last month. The latest from the Kremlin is all the more concerning as Russian President Vladimir Putin announced earlier this month that it will be moving tactical nuclear weapons into Belarus, raising fears that it may use such weapons against Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Wednesday invited Chinese President Xi Jinping to Ukraine for talks, marking what would be the first communication between the two leaders since the outbreak of the war. During an interview with the Associated Press, Zelensky said he is ready to talk to Xi and expressed his willingness for the meeting to take place. The comments come as Zelensky had recently shown his openness to Chinese-led peace talks using Beijing's 12-point peace plan as a backdrop. Xi had previously said that he plans to speak with Zelensky following his summit with Putin earlier this month. However, that has yet to happen, with seemingly no end to the war in Ukraine in sight. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, on to the latest updates on the crypto-fugitive Do Kwon. According to Montenegrin authorities, the U.S. filed a request to extradite disgraced Terraform's lab CEO Do Kwon before South Korea. This was made possible as the U.S. has an embassy in Montenegro, whereas South Korea doesn't. The Justice Minister said that the extradition decision will be based on a number of factors, including the person's nationality, as well as the date in which the request was filed. Kwon will be extradited after he serves a sentence for passport forgery, meaning his extradition process can take some time whichever country he is sent to. The Summit for Democracy, established by the Biden administration to reinforce freedom and transparency, especially against rising authoritarianism, continued virtually on Wednesday. President Yoon opened the second day's leaders' session on economic growth and prosperity. For more, let's turn to Mr. Hans Charlotte. He's a professor of political science at Yonsei University here in Seoul. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dami. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Let's first talk about the Summit for Democracy. What is it, Professor, and how significant or necessary is the meeting at this time? Is the summit meaningful anyway?
Oh, I think so, Dami. Anytime you're pulling together countries, world leaders, and leaders of their respective countries to talk about prospects for democracy, it's very important, I think. And you have to keep in mind that since about 2005, almost the past 20 years, a lot of the big think tanks around the world, research institutes that track the viability of democracy, have found that it's in a pattern of backsliding, both from the top down and from the bottom up. There's been some erosion of the institutions at the national level in many different countries, with leaders that don't necessarily respect of the will of the people. Unfortunately, we saw that on clearest display in the United States after Donald Trump lost the election in 2020. And of course, that result, and it led to acts of the Capitol. So even the U.S. has a lot of issues to work out here. And one other thing, bottom up, there's a lot of changes in how citizens communicate with each other in our media landscapes. It's harder for citizens now, I think, to feel as if they have shared understandings of the truth with their fellow citizens, shared understandings of what the issues are at stake for their countries. So anything that can be done, anything world leaders can do when they come together to talk about how both from the top down and from the bottom up democracy can be greater respected is very important.
Right, using as a platform for all citizens around the world to voice their collective opinions. And also, South Korea is co-hosting this edition of the Summit for Democracy along with Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and also Zambia. And Korea will host the next Summit for Democracy. The question is, how significant is Seoul's participation? I mean, what role can South Korea play in such a summit?
Well, you have more than 100 countries attending, so it's very important, I think, Dami, that Korea is indeed one of the 5 hosts, and it seems as if it's now positioned to be the lead host next time. So I think the challenge will be figure out how to facilitate some deeper conversation and possibly what other kinds of stakeholders and citizens groups can be brought into the next summit. What we've seen so far are mainly conversations with the national leaders themselves and among the national leaders. And it's the government sector that's mainly here at this summit. It would be interesting, I think, and even innovative if the Korean government, as well as its counterparts, I assume there will be some co-hosts for the next summit as well, can think about how to bring in more civil society organizations from around the world and kind of combine the voices of national leaders with the voices of everyday people. The online technology that's used in these kinds of hybrid gatherings gives some interesting platforms. So I think there's a lot of potential for the summit to evolve further and become something more than what it presently is.
Right. It'll be a challenge for also a pending task for South Korea to invite and engage all those people from all corners of the world. And also, President Yoon hosted the first leader-level plenary session on democracy delivering economic growth and shared prosperity. What are some of the key points that you find notable, Professor?
I was left with some questions, actually. I found the speech interesting. I found some of the terms that President Yoon was using in the speech quite interesting. He lamented, for instance, the anti-intellectualism in the political culture. And I would like, as a professor, of course, and as somebody who works with a lot of students and other scholars, I'd like to know a little bit more about exactly how he thinks about anti-intellectualism. And that's not something that's just restricted, say, to university campuses. We've seen a big pushback in many of the world's democracies against what so-called elites in politics and businesses, a lot of what we call populism, people, citizens voting for candidates to blow up the political system or blow up Wall Street or whatever other financial power center you're looking at, have mobilized a lot of working class individuals that now feel in the present day and age that they don't have enough control over their destinies, and they don't feel as if the people in government or business are looking after their interests. So there's also a kind of anti-elitism that goes along with anti-intellectualism. So kind of confronting these sorts of forces is very important. I mean, anybody can get up at a speech and say, okay, we support freedom and human rights and the rule of law. But there are different ways to understand all these concepts. And there are a lot of underlying factors that prompt both citizens and governments to lose faith in democratic processes. So thinking about how to restore that kind of faith will be very important, I think, for the leaders in not just South Korea, but all the co-hosts and collaborators in future democratic summits going.
Indeed. All right, so Mr. Shadow, thank you so much for your insight this morning.
All right, Dami, thank you again for having me. Take care.
You too. With international attention focused on the AI chatbot phenomenon, South Korean companies have also jumped into the race to make one for themselves. One such company is LG and its EXAONE. Our Kim Jong-sil spoke with the developer in charge.
An AI for experts. That's what LG AI Research is aiming for with its large-scale language AI model, EXAONE. Unlike OpenAI's ChatGPT, EXAONE aims to help experts in scientific fields such as chemistry and medicine. With its AI, LG hopes to take advantage of its decades of expertise and accumulated data in chemistry and engineering.
EXAONE can learn 100 years of chemical knowledge in a matter of minutes and can even predict new material candidates, so the process of developing new materials and new drugs can be drastically improved.
Choi added that EXAONE focuses on giving credible results to the user. We asked him how.
There are a lot of documents on the internet that cannot be trusted. That's why LG's EXAONE learns from professional papers and documents that have been acknowledged to be trustworthy. LG's AI can also suggest various ideas to the top 1% of the experts so that they can come up with new ideas.
We also asked him why it's important for LG, a South Korean company, to make this type of AI themselves instead of relying on AIs made by other countries.
In the case of LG, some of our important data isn't supposed to leave the country. And by developing AI ourselves, LG hopes to strengthen business competitiveness for some of our subsidiaries. We think our large-scale language AI will contribute to the business in the future. That is why many companies, not just ones in South Korea, are actively taking part in investment and development of their own AIs.
Choi added that securing talented individuals is the key to success not just for LG, but for companies everywhere, and stressed that LG is looking for talented individuals around the world. 김정실, 아리랑 뉴스.
Spring warmth is in full swing nationwide, meaning it's the perfect time for outings. And among places to enjoy here in Seoul are the royal palaces filled with cherry blossoms and green gardens. Our Shin Se-byuk takes us there.
As spring arrives, royal palaces are awash with colorful blossoms. Visitors to Changdeokgung Palace, one of the 5 major palaces from the Joseon dynasty, get to enjoy this lively season.
It's been really amazing so far, being able to come see the castle, especially the cherry blossoms at the backdrop of all the kind of historical architecture. It's just a very calming place to be.
It's very nice. Everyone in the traditional clothing as well, so it's very pretty sights. All the flowers, all the older buildings as well. It's very cool to see.
This time of the year, special guided tours are also available.
The seasonal tour offers visitors a chance to explore the Nakseonje Hall, a Korea's traditional structure that is known for beautiful architecture and stunning gardens. What's more, those who signed up for this exclusive tour can enjoy the sacred garden.
Standing next to the pavilion towering over the garden hill, tourists get to capture a beautiful view of the spring landscape in one glance. The tree, standing alone in the field, evokes a sense of tranquility. The famous apricot tree in the neighboring Deoksugung Palace also signals a season of new beginnings. Tourists can travel back to the Joseon dynasty during the 90-minute guided tour. A rare glimpse into the interior halls and backyards is a charm.
Someone put me onto this special tour of Deoksugung Palace in Seoul, and I managed to snag a ticket despite it being in high demand. It was a sweet experience, being able to check out the palace's interior in more detail, including some paintings and artifacts that are usually off-limits to the public.
Tourists can enjoy spring scenery in the royal palaces until the first week of April. After that, the Gyeongbokgung Palace nighttime viewing tour will present beautiful whipping cherry blossoms and azaleas that brighten Seoul's night sky. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
Let's start with the United Nations, as the international body has passed a landmark resolution that calls for the world's top court to weigh in on climate obligations.
Well, that's right. Passed on Wednesday by the UN General Assembly at its New York headquarters. The resolution calls on the International Court of Justice to give an advisory opinion on obligations that countries have to address the climate crisis and legal consequences if they fail to meet these. Now, according to the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, such advisory opinions can have a major impact on international legal order, but they are not legally binding. Now, co-sponsored by over 120 countries and 4 years in the making, the passage marks a major win for the Pacific island state of Vanuatu. It was one of the first to lead the initiative, as it has been disproportionately affected by climate change, with adverse weather events. Now, tech billionaire Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak are among 1,100 industry leaders who have signed an open letter that calls for a 6-month halt to the training of artificial intelligence. Now, this is over fears that AI may pose a threat to humanity and that the race to develop it is getting out of control. It outlined that powerful AI systems should only be developed after establishing that the effects will be positive and risks manageable. The letter was published by non-profit organization the Future of Life Institute, which is dedicated to reducing existential risk from advanced AI. Now, the call comes amid growing competition between various AI developers, which has seen the release of ever more advanced systems such as ChatGPT-4. Shifting our attention to Pope Francis now, as the head of the Catholic Church has been hospitalized for respiratory infection. Now, according to the Vatican, on Wednesday, the Pope will be treated for the next few days, and a schedule has been cleared to accommodate his treatment. The news comes as the 86-year-old pontiff has faced a number of health issues recently. He has often been seen using a walking stick or a wheelchair due to knee pain, which also caused him to delay scheduled trips to the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan last year. Now, the Pope revealed in December that he has already signed his resignation letter to be used if he is unable to fulfill his duties due to health issues. And finally, international football governing body FIFA has stripped Indonesia of its right to host this year's Under-20 Football World Cup. According to FIFA, on Wednesday, the decision was made after Indonesia's Football Association, the PSSI, cancelled Sunday's tournament draw because the governor of the island of Bali refused to host the Israeli team. Indonesia is a majority Muslim country with no formal relations with Israel and publicly supports Palestine. Now, the tournament is set to begin May 20th until June 11th, and FIFA says that the dates will remain unchanged for now. FIFA says it will find a new host as soon as possible, while it's also considering sanctions against the PSSI.
Good morning. Today will be warmer than yesterday as highs are forecast to climb into the 20s here in Seoul. Then warm-up continues towards the weekend with a high of 25 degrees Celsius on Saturday. But it's also the dust that will cover parts of Korea. The further west you are, the higher the level of dust you will have today. Jeollanam-do province will have polluted air through the first half of the day. A dry air advisory also remains in place in most central inland regions and parts of the south. Meanwhile, east of Gangwon-do province will be quite windy, blowing at 15 meters per second. So please take precautions against wildfires and drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. Afternoon highs will be 5 to 10 degrees higher than norms, and it's going to feel more like early May than late March today. But if your area is hit hard by that dust, avoid spending too much time outside, which is very unfortunate as the nation is coloring into stunning spring blossoms. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Thanks for watching.